Got a little bit of time this morning with that 2019 Audi SQ5. It's not my car, so I just have a short time with it today. But I've driven this and some other cars, or some other SQ5s previously, and have been able to develop some thoughts on it. So have you join in with me on that this morning. So I think the SQ5 is kind of in a unique place. It's size-wise in between the X3 and the X5 from BMW. It's kind of middle of the road size-wise, but I think it's a good size as far as interior space and physical outside space when it comes to maneuverability. But it's not nearly as powerful as the X5M or the X3M. It's almost like the M Sport models, where it's kind of like an M Lite. But I think it's a good all-rounder. I have said often that if I was in the market for an SUV, this would be one that I would consider, along with maybe one or two others if I was looking for an SUV. But I feel like the SQ5 is a good mix of comfort and sportiness and handling and things like that. It's got a single turbo 3-liter V6, quattro all-wheel drive, of course. And the SQ5 has a valved exhaust, so in drive and comfort and the normal modes, it's quieter. But if you open it up in dynamic mode or through the individual settings, which I drive that way all the time because I like to hear it, it's a decent exhaust note. It's got some off-throttle burbles and crackles and pops. Fuel economy is okay. Handles well enough for what you want. One thing I wish it did have, because it's just one of my all-time favorite things, is the seats out of the S4 and S5, as well as the RS5. They've got more bolstering. They have adjustable side bolsterings and things like that. But this does have the thigh extension on the lower seat bottom. So it's got some things I do like and some things I wish it had on the seats. But overall, they're comfortable enough. The interior is quiet enough. It's got a panoramic sunroof. This is kind of, I believe this is a premium model, so it's the base model with some interesting upgrades. Does not have the touchpad for the MMI. It's got the basic buttons like 1 through 8 and things like that. And it's got the smaller display than the upgraded version. So the upgraded models have a touchpad in addition to the scroll wheel, and they have a larger display. But all models of this generation had Apple CarPlay connectivity. Going along with the base model SQ5, it has the Alcantara seats, which actually I think look pretty good. You still get the same seats, they just have, instead of full leather, or if you get the Napa leather upgrade, that has the quilted look leather, which looks great. But this has Alcantara inserts on the door panels as well as the seat inserts. This does not have the virtual cockpit. It's got the base gauges. The center is a multifunction display. You can see things like fuel economy and time and speed and directions, phone connectivity, media, but it's got physical gauges for the speedometer and the tach, the coolant temperature, and the fuel level. It also has the beam ring option, so for the puddle lights, there are these little inserts that illuminate the Audi rings on the ground when you open the doors. It's a nice little feature. Looks great at night. One thing I've learned that I prefer when it comes to automatic transmission vehicles with paddle shifters is I prefer them to be mounted on the column and not with the wheel, because when you're steering and things like that, the paddle position is always in a different place relative to 9 and 3 on the steering wheel. Whereas when they're on the column, they're always in the same place. You can grab the gear whenever you want it. They're really just kind of buttons that have extended pads on them. They're not the most engaging. They do their function, but you know, they're okay. This does have the valved exhaust, and when it's closed, it's actually pretty quiet. But when it's open and you hold the RPMs, it sounds great between 3 and 4,500 RPM. This has a flat bottom steering wheel, which I'm still unsure about how I feel about those. I've driven a few cars with a flat bottom wheel, and I don't know. I mean, it looks cool, but every now and then when I'm, you know, going through motions of maneuvering, like parallel parking or whatever, when you get to the flat spot, it just kind of throws me off. So I guess if I lived with it every day as my, you know, on a personal car, I might get used to it. Other than that, the steering wheel's great. I like the thickness of it. It's got the thumb rests at 10 and 2, and it's got a little nub here at what would that be, 4 and 8. It feels great. I do like that it has an open spoke on the bottom. I've always kind of liked that, although I stopped using the steering wheel in this position. I've tried to adapt to 9 and 3 most of the time. One thing I do like about Audis is just, at least of this generation, the B9 era of Audis, I like the controls. The steering wheel controls are well laid out, and you can do a lot of different things with them. It's got the physical controls for the HVAC and the drive modes and some other things like that. This is one of my favorite generations of Audi vehicles, whether it be the S4, S5, the A4, A5. This B9, B9.5 interior is really great. Some people say that the interiors are boring. I just like a nice, functional, understated interior. Everything's well laid out. Of course, being a German vehicle, the cup holders barely make do. They're big enough for some, you know, drive-through cups, but the mug I use for work it barely fits in there. It's kind of it's snug fit and hard to get out easily. But they're better than my Cayman. Acceleration's okay. You can tell it's not a monster. Like the X5M and the AMG models are definitely more powerful, but this is a good combination of not being hair on fire and not being boring. I believe, like the S4 and S5, this engine is rated at 349 horsepower. That's on 91 octane. If you're able to get it, APR has verified testing that on 93 octane on the stock computer tune, you actually gain 50 horsepower. So with these cars, the single turbo 3-liter V6 on the factory tune at 93 octane, .395 horsepower, which is pretty good. Let's turn the cruise on. I mean, that's pretty much the best bang for your buck when it comes to power upgrades. Instead of buying a tune for $500, $600, $800, you can pay a few cents more at the pump and get 50 horsepower. That's pretty good. At least where I fill up, 91 is usually about 2 to 5 cents cheaper than 93. Again, that's if you can get 93. I understand in some places you can't, but if you do have access to that, I definitely recommend paying a little bit extra. You'll have the much more enjoyable car. So being a base model, this doesn't have some of the driver assist features like adaptive cruise control or lane keep assist. It does have blind spot monitoring. One of the upgrades is what they call a phone box. It has a wireless charger here, and then it's almost like an antenna extension for the phone. But for someone like me that doesn't love a lot of the driver assist features in a lot of cars these days, this would be a great kind of middle of the road. It's a sporty vehicle, but it doesn't have a lot of nannies to yell at you every time you do something that it doesn't like. Obviously, it's going to have traction and stability control. So this car has a little over 30,000 miles on it, and looks like no one has reset the long-term trip meter. And so over 30,300 miles, it's got an average of 18.7 miles per gallon. So definitely be a great road trip car. It's got plenty of space for luggage. It's got room to stretch out. It rides pretty well. Now this car, being the base model, it does have the steel springs, the coil springs. When you upgrade to one of the higher end models, you do have the option for air suspension, and that will actually allow you to raise and lower the vehicle, which when it's lowered, it actually looks really great. The stance at that point is pretty much perfect. But the ride on the steel springs is good enough. Like, it's not harsh. The dampers are adjustable, but it still rides pretty good. See, now to reach for the paddle, I was all the way over here to upshift. Now you could argue that if it was on the column, when I was over here, I would have to reach all the way over here to get the paddle. I take that back. I do like having the paddle on the wheel, but these are just too small. They're about this big, and so there's not a lot of room to find them. What I was thinking of was on my wife's G37 with the paddles. Those are about 6 or 7 inches long and wrap from about 1 to 5 on the steering wheel. Those are great. They feel good, they click well. Crossed over like that, and you just have that small shift paddle, it can be hard to get the right grip on it. One thing you may not know about Audis, at least on their sport models, is when you floor it, you think you've gone all the way, but if you push a little bit harder, or you click past this little detent, and you get like 5 or 10% more throttle. I don't know how much more you can notice it, but it's there. It's a secret. It's a little Easter egg. Coasting 2,000 RPM, you really can't hear the engine even in dynamic mode. But when you give it some throttle, that's when you really hear it. A little bit of pop pop. So would I recommend this vehicle, and who would I recommend it to? I would recommend it to someone who, for whatever reason, decides they need to have an SUV. They want something somewhat luxurious, somewhat sporty, but something that's not completely extravagant in any way. Something that's going to blend in. You can do that in this car. This is black. It's got black interior. If you drive it in comfort or auto with the flaps closed, no one ever knows this has any kind of sporty intentions to it. But at the same time, you can put everything in dynamic, firm things up, open up the exhaust, have some fun on the back road. It's really a good all-arounder. It's, in my opinion, it's the definition of a sport utility vehicle. It's got some sport, it's got some utility. So what do you think? Now, I have nothing to benchmark this against. I've not driven its competitors from BMW or Mercedes. But for my money, I think it's a good overall value, especially if you buy one used. So tell me what questions you have, or what you like about these vehicles, or if you've got experience with its competitors. Leave a comment in the description below. Like if you haven't already, and subscribe. And I'll see you on the next one.